We're proud to sponsor this first in a series of events designed to raise awareness about the imminent arrival of building upgrade finance. And we thank the Property Council for giving us this forum to do this. What I want to do is provide a bit of an overview of the scheme, plus a sense of where it fits in the wider economic and policy context of South Australia. I also want to acknowledge our partners, obviously the Property Council, but also the Local Government Association and the Adelaide City Council for giving in-principle support for this scheme. The Lord Mayor, who will be here in a moment, has led a council which has, I think, enjoyed a very strong relationship with the South Australian Government. One of the first things that I wanted to do upon getting this job was to get a better relationship with the Adelaide City Council. Principally because I've always taken the view that modern regions compete on the attractiveness of their capital cities. This is the way in which we project an image of our state to the world. And so the capital city is much more than just a city for the residents of the council. It's of course that, but it's also something about the state. And so this relationship between the state government and the capital city council is a crucial one, and I believe that the Lord Mayor and I have forged a very strong relationship, and I thank him for his support in a range of initiatives, as well as the one we're about to discuss today. The Building Upgrade Finance Program meets an election commitment that we made in 2014 to set up a mechanism that helps owners overcome financial barriers to making their buildings more energy and water efficient. This is a somewhat complex field of policy, and a bit later there will be people here that can explain the more technical aspects of it. But to put it simply, it's a voluntary scheme which makes it easier for building owners to obtain private finance for upgrades and on better terms than traditional finance, obviously with the objective of ensuring that those upgrades occur. And by tying the upgrade loan to the property rather than the owner, by having payments collected by the local council in the form of a charge, the financier has greater security, is exposed to less risk, and therefore makes the product a much more attractive one. Similar forms of finance have been available in Victoria and in New South Wales for a little while now, but our scheme, while following elements of those over the state scheme, has to some degree taken their efforts further. Indeed, South Australia has a mechanism that will be the first in the country to be applied to heritage upgrades of heritage buildings, and of course we're blessed with a number of those in Adelaide. The legislation for the program has been passed by the State Parliament, and my government is working with local government, the finance and property sectors and tenancy groups to complete the remaining elements of the mechanism so that it can come into operation. So obviously talking to the community is a critical element of that. That's one of the reasons we were keen to sponsor this event, so those elements can begin very soon. We expect to launch in the coming months an early adopter program that will identify and implement the initial suite of upgrades that can be financed through this mechanism. Given this timeline, it's not too early for building owners to be talking to the Property Council and to flag their interest in being part of that early adopter scheme. So what I think we're going to come up with is a program which is both innovative but is also has many practical applications. We want to create environmental benefits and unlock economic activity to make sure that there's a genuine win-win for everybody concerned. What we see is an opportunity for people to actually reduce their costs of operation of their building, at the same time increase their resource efficiency. But what we're seeing is that there are barriers to those obvious changes taking place, and that's the whole purpose of the Building Upgrade Finance. For building owners, it provides an incentive to provide and improve the look, the amenity and performance of assets, making them more valuable and competitive in the marketplace. For tenants, greater water and energy efficiency means smaller utility bills, fresher, more efficient buildings that can lift staff productivity. And for local companies, retrofitting the properties and manufacturing the new clean technologies such as solar panels and high-tech air conditioning will generate more businesses and more jobs. For councils, the benefits include the attraction of new investment, growth in local economic activity, and of course reduced carbon emissions. For South Australia as a whole though, it speaks very directly to our ambitions in relation to reducing our carbon footprint. We do have an ambition as our city to be the world's first carbon neutral city. We have an ambition as a state to be carbon neutral by 2050. And the opportunities that accrue to first movers in what we all know is going to be a carbon constrained environment are profound. The first movers that can make the adjustments will actually be better placed to avoid the costs of adjustment, which will be larger later. And of course, first movers get the opportunity to create the innovations and the businesses that help people to make those adjustments. And if we're moving first in that regard, creating the businesses and the opportunities, we can get business and custom that exists elsewhere around the nation and around the world. So for South Australia as a whole, the scheme will contribute to our concerted effort to cut carbon emissions and to create a more sustainable lifestyle. It also will create important economic development opportunities. When we talk about upgrading buildings, most of us probably have in mind an image of a skyscraper situated in the CBD. It's important to point out, however, that the Building Upgrade Finance Scheme can work towards dealing with other forms of development, all kinds of commercial and industrial properties, not only office towers. These include everything from shopping centres, hotels, factories, warehouses, wineries and dairies. The nature of those building upgrades can take many different forms. We're already seeing much interest in large-scale solar installations, for instance. And there's scope for money to be spent on things like LED lighting, waste management systems, facade treatments and energy storage. And for those wishing to use building upgrade finance, it's impossible to say precisely how much an environmental makeover will make to your bottom line. Each case will be different and the impact will depend on many factors. These factors will include the age and the quality of the existing building, the scale of work involved, and the type of new technology to be installed. But it's fair to say that a major upgrade has the potential to provide substantial savings and long-term benefits. By way of an example, I want to highlight the refurbishment of 1 King William Street, a building that's in the southwest corner of King William Street and North Terrace intersection facing Parliament House. That work, undertaken by the building's owner, Anvil Capital, included photovoltaic, tri-generation systems, sun hoods, insulated facade and an upgraded building management system. These measures were made possible through the support of the state government's Building Innovation Fund. And what it's achieved is reduced ongoing costs, made it a more pleasant place to visit and work, improved the energy rating of the building and cut carbon emissions by about 1,500 tonnes per annum. The project also supported local jobs in the engineering and construction sectors. So ladies and gentlemen, I strongly support the Building Upgrade Finance Scheme because it's not only good for business, but it also fosters aesthetic and environmental improvements to our built environment. I support it because it advantages a range of state government policies and priorities. And in the broadest sense, it helps us make the necessary transition from an old to the new economy. I mean, the new norm is change. We are going to have to continue to do new things in new ways if we're to survive an increasingly competitive world. Being able to understand the forces that are bearing down on us and actually respond creatively to the challenges that they place on us represents opportunity, not threat. And so this is how we should apply ourselves to the issues associated with a carbon-constrained environment. This measure also complements the principles outlined in the 30-year plan for Adelaide, a draft update of which was released by the Minister for Planning, John Rao, last week. And it relates to at least 3 of the 10 policy areas which we've laid down as the critical areas of economic activity for South Australia. You recall that in 2014 we undertook a very substantial exercise where we consulted the community about what we needed to do to transform the South Australian economy. And we identified 5 sectors of the economy. We identified 5 drivers for growth and change. Those 5 sectors were the mining and renewable energy sector, the food and wine sector, the health and health industry sector, our international tourism and our international students. And the 5 enablers of growth were the internationalisation of the South Australian economy, our city as a projector of capital across the whole of our state, driving our small business community, and the innovation that we need to do in all aspects of our daily life, and finally making sure that South Australia is the best place to do business anywhere in this nation. And we're proceeding and driving forward on that economic plan for our state, and it's bearing fruit. But this initiative helps us to drive 3 important elements of that economic plan: unlocking the full potential of South Australia's resources, energy and renewable assets, growth through innovation, and of course Adelaide at the heart of our vibrant state. In a more direct way, our new finance scheme encourages activity that adds to our credentials in the fields of renewable energy and climate change policy. When it comes to renewables, our state has made enormous strides in the past 10 to 15 years. From virtually a standing start in 2002, now about 41% of the state's electricity is generated from renewable sources such as wind and solar. And we've set a target to make that proportion 50% by 2025. And as I said before, we're aiming to have the whole state zero net emissions by 2050. Another marker that I discussed earlier is the goal arising from our partnership with the Adelaide City Council, and that's to make our capital city the world's first carbon neutral city. We have the opportunity to do this. One of the great advantages of Adelaide is that it's geographically, culturally and politically a distinct unit. We have a discrete unit here, fringed by the parklands, that allows us to focus attention and project an image of our state to the world. It's incredibly important to gain this reputation in a world which is where everybody around the world is competing for attention. I mean, we're talking about a media-saturated society where everybody in my position is trying to promote their region. And what we need are key arrowheads which project our image of our state to the world. An incredibly powerful image is the image of being a first mover in this incredibly important issue of responding to a carbon-constrained environment. And the work that we're doing in partnership with the Adelaide City Council involves purchasing zero or low emission cars from the state government fleet, making hybrid or electric vehicles the preferred mode of transport in the CBD, and improving the energy efficiency of government buildings. I should mention on that last point, our government is making real progress. Recent figures show that in 2014-15, the energy efficiency of state government buildings was 22.1% higher than the baseline year of 2000-2001. They also show that greenhouse gas emissions intensity of government buildings has fallen by 41.6% since 2000 to 2001. And the other revealing statistic is that 80% of leased government buildings based on floor space have a national Australian Built Environment Rating System, NABERS Energy Rating of 4 stars or more. Now, I know that there is a debate in the community about whether South Australia has done too much too quickly in relation to climate change, witnessing the pressures that are being brought to bear on our energy market. But the evidence suggests that we are on the right track. We've demonstrated that you can cut carbon emissions and still enjoy economic growth, that the two things are not mutually exclusive, that we can essentially decouple economic growth from carbon emissions. Between 1990 and 2014, South Australia reduced its emissions by 8%. But during that same period, the size of our economy increased by 60%. So we have broken the link between carbon emissions and economic growth. And I believe these numbers demonstrate that this has now become an established truth. And the truth is, for states like ours that have progressive policies and are seeking to create our own future, climate change represents not merely a threat, but an economic opportunity. This was the message coming out of the climate talks in Paris that occurred late last year. What we've moved from is, instead of just this being seen as a threat to our global environment, it's now being seen increasingly as an opportunity. There is no major company, despite what they may or may not say publicly, that does not believe that we exist in a carbon-constrained community. And all of them, absolutely every single one of them, are pricing in a price on carbon to their future plans about the future investment decisions they make. So governments can decide to do these things or not, but businesses are already moving on. Now, they'd like us to formalise this by having some formal price on carbon, but nevertheless, they've moved on and they're already making these judgments. And it will be those states and those businesses and those jurisdictions that actually act on this first and make this part of their strategic planning that will reap the benefits. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've really appreciated this opportunity to talk about not only this particular scheme, but how it is located in our broader context about seeking carbon neutrality, how we respond to a carbon-constrained environment. Building Upgrade Finance has the potential to bring important change and improve the way in which we both live and work, but at the same time, it can stimulate jobs and opportunities in South Australia. I very much hope that the people in this room, especially the building owners, will take the opportunity to consider carefully this scheme. It does repay careful consideration. We believe it will be a benefit for you and your businesses, and in making that contribution, you're also advancing the interests of South Australia. Thank you very much.